The deep sea is a realm filled with the unknown. Throughout human history, sailors have often returned with stories of deep-sea monsters. Those tales have become the source of countless nightmares for us. They spoke of gigantic creatures lurking on the ocean floor, almost impossibly large, like monsters out of myth. Yet in the past few decades, as deep-sea exploration has advanced, we've discovered that this place is actually full of wonders, both strange and magnificent. It is a hidden world teeming with life. Glowing points of light dance in the darkness. There are vibrant coral reefs and towering structures like underwater cities supporting complex communities of organisms. All of this challenges our understanding of life and pushes science to continually move forward. Although we may not have truly found Lovecraftian horrors lurking in the abyss, one thing is certain. The deeper you go, the stranger and often larger the creatures become. In general, deep-sea organisms are much larger than their relatives living in shallow waters. This phenomenon is called deep-sea gigantism. It is particularly noticeable among deep-sea invertebrates, from giant amphipods over 40 centimeters long to enormous cephalopods. At first glance, this seems to contradict common sense. In the deep sea, food is extremely scarce and hunting is very difficult. Theoretically, being large should be a disadvantage. Next, we'll explore the scientific explanations behind this phenomenon and get to know some of the giant creatures that rule the deep. Before we officially begin our journey of exploration, leave your small goal in the comments. Who knows, it might come true. The upcoming content is quite information-dense, so please listen carefully, and feel free to drift peacefully into sleep. When talking about the harsh deep-sea environment, people often misunderstand and assume high pressure is the main challenge for these creatures. According to data from the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, for every additional 10 meters in depth, the water pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. This means that at the bottom of the sunlit zone, at a depth of about 1,000 meters, the water pressure has already reached around 101 atmospheres. Yet the organisms living there seem completely unaffected. Take the transparent siphonophore that resembles a red worm as an example. It simply floats in infinite darkness. Siphonophores are colonial organisms made up of hundreds of tiny individuals called zooids that work together to survive. The largest siphonophores can even surpass the length of a blue whale. Even in the deepest part of the ocean, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, over 10,900 meters down, life still exists. The deepest known fish, the Mariana snailfish, can live at depths up to 8,000 meters. There, the water pressure is about 801 times atmospheric pressure at the surface. Yet for these organisms, pressure is actually not a major problem. That's because their bodies are composed mostly of water, and water is nearly incompressible, helping them withstand external pressure. In addition, buoyancy in the ocean means they do not need to constantly fight gravity. This buoyancy support allows them to avoid being crushed by their own weight and still grow to enormous sizes. This explains how they can become so large. But if we want to understand why they need to become so large, we have to start from their biological traits. The phenomenon of deep-sea gigantism is often explained using two biological rules, Kleiber's law and Bergmann's law. However, both explanations have been debated within the scientific community. Kleiber's law states that a larger animal is, the slower its metabolic rate and the more efficiently it uses energy. For example, a cow may weigh hundreds of times more than a mouse, yet its metabolism per unit of body mass is much slower. The reason is that an animal's circulatory system is constrained by volume and surface area. As body size increases, volume grows faster than surface area. In other words, large animals have a smaller surface area to volume ratio. As a result, they lose less heat per unit of mass and require less energy to maintain body temperature. In the deep sea, where food is scarce, a slow metabolism like this is a huge advantage. At around 200 meters below the sea surface, sunlight has already become dim and weak.
no longer sufficient for plants, algae, or phytoplankton to photosynthesize. There is no longer any primary production of energy here. The deep-sea food web is forced to rely on particles sinking from the upper layers of the ocean. These falling particles, known as marine snow, consist of dead organisms and their waste gently drifting downward like a fine rain. Because food is so limited, saving energy becomes vitally important. This in turn drives deep-sea organisms to evolve toward larger body sizes to improve energy efficiency. Take amphipods as an example. They are the scavengers of the ocean, found almost everywhere on Earth. Some species living on beaches are only about 8 millimeters long, while others inhabit the deepest parts of the Mariana Trench at 10,900 meters. In such profound darkness, giant deep-sea amphipods emerge. They have even evolved the ability to break down wood and can consume almost any organic matter that sinks to the seafloor. They play an ecologically crucial role in the deep sea, acting as recyclers of hard-to-decompose material and converting it into nutrients that other organisms can use. Without them, the seafloor would be covered in plant and animal remains. These amphipods can eat an amount of food equal to 60 to 100% of their body weight each day. Highly adapted to a cleanup crew lifestyle, they have agile clawed legs and sharp cutting edges that allow them to slice food with great precision. In the Hadal zone, giant deep-sea amphipods can grow over 34 centimeters long. They move slowly and are often seen clumsily crashing into bait, latching on tightly, and then feeding for hours. Although they are much larger than their shallow water relatives, such size is not unusual in the deep sea. In shallow waters, that ecological niche is usually occupied by large crustaceans, like crabs. The giant squid is one of the most famous examples of deep-sea gigantism. It can weigh up to 700 kilograms and reach lengths of 15 meters, living at depths around 2,100 meters. It's not only the largest invertebrate on Earth, but also has the largest eyes of any known animal. Even so, humans have rarely observed giant squid alive, let alone filmed them in the wild. Other deep-sea cephalopods are not as large as the giant squid, but they're still far bigger than shallow water species. For example, the red vampire imp, also called the red devil, can reach about 2.5 meters in length, making it one of the largest non-squid cephalopods. At around 4,000 meters deep lives an even more mysterious cephalopod, the big fin squid. Its body is about 8 meters long, with extremely thin, elongated arms that hang straight down, looking as if it's manipulating a marionette puppet. These long arms dangle into deeper water below to sense plankton and other small organisms, while its body remains hidden in the darkness above, lying in wait to ambush prey. At present, we know almost nothing about this animal. It was first observed only about 20 years ago, and there are still very few video records. One such video is the latest observation captured by a NOAA remotely operated vehicle on November 9th in the Gulf of Mexico at a depth of about 2,500 meters. Although deep-sea gigantism is most evident in invertebrates, it can also help us understand some size characteristics in deep-sea vertebrates. In the icy waters of the Arctic, one of the largest sharks in the ocean lurks, the Greenland shark. It belongs to a group of deep-sea sharks commonly known as sleeper sharks. They can grow to nearly 7 meters in length and live at depths greater than 2,000 meters. To cope with such extreme conditions, they've evolved highly efficient energy use strategies. We can divide their body mass into two parts: structural mass and reserve mass. Structural mass consists of organs and tissues that require ongoing energy to maintain. Reserve mass consists mainly of fat and stored energy, which is much cheaper to maintain. The larger the body, the more food it can store. This allows Greenland sharks, when feeding or searching for mates, to travel farther and endure longer. Some individuals can weigh up to 1,400 kilograms, whereas many shallow water shark species weigh only about 60 to 400 kilograms. As their name suggests, sleeper sharks are the slowest moving sharks in the world. Their average speed is only about 0.3 meters per second. Compared to the extremely fast, short fin mako, sleeper sharks have short, broad tail fins, which are not suitable for sustained high-speed swimming, but are good for brief bursts of speed when attacking prey. Most of the time, however, they don't waste energy chasing prey. Instead, they rely primarily on their sense of smell to locate carcasses or animals that have sunk to the bottom. A whale carcass, for instance, can attract many Greenland sharks to feed. They gorge themselves in a single meal, storing food in their huge stomachs. One study...
Even more astonishing is that their extremely slow metabolism gives them an incredible lifespan. Scientists used radiocarbon dating on the lens tissue of the eyes of 28 female Greenland sharks in the North Atlantic. The results showed that the two largest individuals were about 335 to 392 years old. Even so, Kleiber's law still cannot explain all giant organisms. Some species have no fully developed digestive system and hardly move at all, consuming very little energy, yet still grow to enormous sizes. Deep-sea sponge communities are an example. They host tens of thousands of such organisms. One massive sponge was discovered in 2015 near the Hawaiian Islands at a depth of 2,134 meters. It measured about 3.5 meters long and 2.1 meters high, roughly the size of a small van. Like most deep-sea organisms, it survives on slowly falling marine snow, pumping water continuously through its body to filter out nutrients. Its ability to grow so large may be due to the extremely stable environment it lives in. Almost no large waves disturb it, and predators such as sea turtles, common in tropical waters, are almost completely absent in the deep sea. Another theory used to explain deep-sea gigantism is Bergmann's rule. This rule suggests that as temperature declines, animal body size tends to increase. This matches observations. Most marine animals showing gigantism live in cold waters. In the deep sea, the absence of sunlight leads to dramatically lower temperatures. This not only enlarges cells and extends lifespans, but also slows metabolic rates. In fact, gigantism is most obvious in polar regions. Even in shallow waters there, animals like sea stars, sponges, sea cucumbers, and polychaete worms can grow much larger than their relatives in warmer seas. For more than a century, zoologists and polar explorers using troll nets in polar deep waters have collected countless bizarre creatures, such as plate-sized sea spiders with legs up to 60 centimeters long. By comparison, the same species in other regions may measure less than a millimeter. In the polar deep sea, sponges up to 2 meters tall cling to boulders dropped by drifting icebergs. These rocks provide hard surfaces for filter feeders to attach to. Thanks to this, feather stars and cold water corals can also settle in these areas. These plant-like animals have adapted to a stable, almost unchanging environment. Although they grow very slowly, they can eventually reach massive sizes. Fish are rarely seen here, unlike in most marine ecosystems where fish dominate. In such extreme cold, fish find it difficult to survive. This zone resembles a prehistoric world ruled by giant invertebrates. One example is the Antarctic sunflower starfish, which uses tiny pincers to catch krill passing by. The ecosystem they belong to has been isolated from the rest of the planet for millions of years. The Antarctic circumpolar current forms a steep temperature gradient that prevents outside species from entering and also cuts off genetic exchange. This isolation has driven the diversity we see today. In polar environments, slow metabolism makes many animals seem as if they're moving in slow motion. This grants them longer lifespans. The key lies in oxygen. Warm water holds less oxygen because higher temperatures mean faster molecular motion, allowing oxygen to escape more easily. Cold polar waters, by contrast, are rich in oxygen. Low temperatures not only increase the amount of dissolved oxygen, but also reduce animals' oxygen requirements by slowing metabolism. This greatly improves the balance between oxygen supply and demand. In other words, polar animals can maintain large bodies without worrying about oxygen shortage.
This is known as the oxygen temperature hypothesis and may be a core mechanism behind polar gigantism. But if this is true, then these giant polar organisms are extremely sensitive to climate change because warming disrupts the ecological balance they depend on. Currently, climate change is happening faster in polar regions than anywhere else on Earth. As ice melts and seawater warms, the once oxygen-rich polar waters begin to lose oxygen. Large animals can no longer sustain normal metabolism. Even more troubling, once stable and isolated polar ecosystems are now being disrupted by invasive species. King crabs, for example, ferocious predators once kept at bay by low temperatures, are gradually invading as waters warm. They ravage the seafloor, preying on native species that never evolved defenses against such predators, leading to ecological disasters. Studying island ecosystems can offer valuable clues for understanding gigantism in the deep sea and polar regions. Because islands are isolated from continents, they often develop unique ecosystems. Species that first colonize an island evolve independently over time, eventually forming endemic species found nowhere else. As time passes, they diversify into many forms to adapt to local conditions, a process called adaptive radiation. In the Galapagos Islands, for instance, there are 13 species of small ground-dwelling finches, collectively known as Darwin's finches, a classic example of adaptive radiation. Their common ancestor arrived about 2 million years ago and later evolved into 15 distinct species. They differ markedly in body size, beak shape, and feeding habits. Because strong competition is lacking, they are able to exploit different ecological niches, evolving diverse survival strategies. This is a clear manifestation of island evolution. Another interesting phenomenon is that animal body size often changes on islands. Studies have shown that large animals tend to become smaller, while small animals tend to become larger. This is known as the island rule. On islands, food is scarce, competition pressure is low, and large predators are absent. In such an environment, small animals benefit from becoming larger. They can use resources more efficiently, live longer, and reduce energy loss. Conversely, very large animals, such as elephants or deer, find that the island environment cannot support their original physiological demands, so over time they evolve into dwarf forms. In the fossil record, scientists have found dwarf elephants and dwarf hippos on islands, which are direct evidence of this body size reset process. So what does the island rule have to do with the deep sea? The deep ocean is like a gigantic liquid island, isolated from surface environments. Light barely reaches it, temperatures remain stable year-round, and the paths by which species can enter are very limited. Evolution in such a place is heavily constrained. Resources are extremely limited, many ecological niches are unfilled, and predators are relatively few. In effect, it is like a set of ecological islands far from any mainland. Therefore, the island rule can also be applied to the deep sea. Species that migrate into the deep sea must readjust their body size to adapt to harsh conditions, where resources are scarce but pressure and temperature are constant. Deep-sea gigantism spans many taxa and regions, from icy polar waters to the deepest ocean trenches, from immobile sponges to active predators. Although there is no single, unified explanation that covers all cases, the presence of these giants reveals an important truth, that even in environments where resources are extremely limited, life can adapt through finely tuned energy management and extreme structural adjustments to survive. This not only challenges our traditional understanding of survival of the fittest, but also reminds us that nature's rules are diverse and flexible. Even in the darkest, most remote corners of Earth, life still finds its own way. Our study of these organisms is not only to satisfy curiosity, but also to better understand how entire ecosystems function, evolve, and how they may respond to global changes in the future. To this day, the deep sea remains one of the least understood ecosystems on the planet. These giant creatures are signals left to us by that hidden world, proof that even where there is no light, life is still vast and complex and worthy of being heard.